Congratulations! You have just awakened in rural England, 1867. The air is crisp, and darkness still covers the land as you open your eyes on a lumpy straw mattress. It is 4:30 in the morning, and your day as a Victorian farmer has already started. Good news, you hold one of the most vital tasks in the British Empire, feeding a rapidly expanding nation. Bad news, almost every aspect of your new life is going to challenge your limits in ways your modern body and mind are unprepared for. Your cottage is a modest reflection of Victorian rural existence. It is a small 2-up, 2-down house with 2 confined rooms below and 2 even smaller bedrooms above. The windows vibrate in the morning breeze, and several panes are patched with paper where the glass is cracked. The roof leaks when it rains, a common occurrence in England. The floor underfoot is not the polished hardwood or carpet you are accustomed to. It is packed dirt, cold, and occasionally damp. Outside, frost glitters on the fields as the first hint of dawn light appears. You pull on rough woolen clothing that immediately begins to scratch your skin. These are not the soft, treated fabrics of your time. This wool is coarse, minimally processed, and designed for function over comfort. The shirt and trousers are mended repeatedly with patches, as clothing is expensive and difficult to replace. A small coal fire smolders in the great room, offering just enough warmth to alleviate the morning chill. As you move through the cottage, your breath clouds the air. The fire must be tended before anything else. Without it, there will be no breakfast, no hot water for washing, and no warmth for later. At least I can make a quick cup of coffee, you think. But wait, that's not an option. While the wealthy enjoy coffee or tea with breakfast, you, as a farm laborer, likely subsist on a thin porridge made from flour, butter, and water. This porridge sits heavily, providing calories but little flavor or comfort. You might add a small cup of ale, even at breakfast, because the water is often unsafe, and the small beer offers both hydration and extra calories for the upcoming labor. After finishing breakfast, you step into the pre-dawn chill outside. There is no time to delay. The animals require tending, and the day's labor will not wait for you to adapt to this new reality. Your boots, stiff leather with thin soles, provide little defense against the cold and damp. As you walk across the yard to the small barn, the animals greet you with impatient sounds. The cow needs milking, the chickens need feeding, and the pig in its sty grunts for its morning meal. These are more than mere farm animals. They are your lifeline. The cow's milk, the chicken's eggs, and eventually the meat from your pig will supplement your meager wages. Without these creatures, your family would likely starve during the lean months. The cow regards you with suspicious eyes as you approach with a 3-legged wooden stool and a metal pail. You have never milked a cow before, have you? It is not as simple as it appears. Your stiff, cold fingers struggle to find the rhythm to coax the milk from the udder. The cow shifts impatiently, a hoof dangerously close to your toes. After frustrating minutes, you extract enough milk to half fill the pail. A poor showing by Victorian standards, but a start. By now, the first true light of dawn has broken, painting the landscape in pink and gold. It would be lovely if you had the time to appreciate it, but the farm's schedule doesn't wait, and you're already behind. The employer, for most laborers, doesn't own their land and expects you in the fields by 6:30 a.m. there. You join others for a long day of whatever seasonal task is needed. In winter, this could involve threshing grain by hand in the barn, a repetitive, dusty job that causes aching arms and irritated lungs. In spring, work involves plowing and sowing, forcing a heavy iron plow through soil that stubbornly resists effort. Summer is dedicated to continuous weeding and crop tending, and autumn brings the most demanding labor, the harvest, where everyone works from dawn till late to gather crops before rain spoils them. Today, as it is early spring, the focus is on preparing the soil for planting. The farmer greets you at the field's edge, his look critical upon noticing your tardiness. As a tenant farmer renting the land from a wealthy landowner, the demand for a good harvest translates into long hours and demanding labor for you. "We're working the south field today," he states, pointing to a swath of land stretching to the horizon. Take a spade and begin at the far end. You view the heavy iron spade, fitted with a wooden handle polished smooth by years of use, that he has just given you. This is not the light garden implement you likely know. It is a serious tool intended for cultivating vast tracts of earth, and it weighs so much that your arms protest as soon as you lift it. Fortunately, by the 1860s, horse-drawn plows were established on numerous farms, easing some of the most arduous labor. The unfortunate reality is that not all tasks can be accomplished with a plow, and numerous farms still depend heavily on manual labor for various jobs. Today, you are one of those laborers. As you reach the field's end, each step highlights your body's unpreparedness for this work. Modern life, with its cushioned footwear, ergonomic seating, and minimal physical demands, has not prepared you for the strain you are about to face. The initial thrust of the spade into the earth demands greater force than expected. The ground, still partially frozen by the winter cold, resists your attempts. You lean into it, and the blade finally penetrates. One stroke accomplished, and countless more remain. Within an hour, your hands developed blisters, despite the calluses the body's former owner might have accrued from years of similar labor. By noon, these blisters ruptured, leaving your palms raw and acutely painful. The sun ascends, yet the spring air stays cool, a small relief as sweat begins to dampen your coarse cotton shirt. There are no rest periods, save for a brief midday halt to eat simple bread and maybe some cheese or cold bacon if you are lucky. Water is drawn from a shared jug passed among the laborers. Another blow to your modern awareness, used to personal water bottles and worries about germs. As the day progressed, muscles you were unaware of had begun to protest. Your lower back ached, your shoulders burned, and your legs trembled with exhaustion. But stopping was not an option. Farm work in Victorian England was measured not by hours, but by daylight. You worked until the task was complete, or until it became too dark to continue. Around you, the other laborers persisted in their work, with the steady rhythm of those accustomed to such demands. Many have performed this labor since childhood, their bodies molded by years of physical toil. Children as young as 6 or 7 were expected to assist on the farm, scaring birds from newly planted fields, gathering stones, or aiding in the harvest. By age 12, most would be working nearly full adult days. You observe one such child now, a boy of perhaps 10, carrying water for the workers. His clothes are patched and too small, his face smudged with dirt. But his movements reveal a resilience shaped by adaptation to this harsh existence. This is not merely farming, it is the reality of Victorian childhood for many. The afternoon stretches limitlessly before you. Your modern concept of time, measured by clocks and convenient segments, vanishes into a continuous flow of labor, dictated only by the sun's position and your body's mounting protests. With no smartphones to check, no music to distract you, no podcasts to pass time, there is only the repetitive motion of the spade, the resistance of the soil, and the growing certainty that you were not built for this life. As late afternoon nears and the sun sinks toward the horizon, you have covered only half the assigned area. The farmer frowns at your progress, but remains silent. Words are unnecessary to express his disappointment. The remaining workers must cover your slack, increasing their already considerable burden. As twilight nears, you are finally permitted to put down your tools and begin the arduous trek back to your cottage. Each step demands great effort. Your muscles tremble with exhaustion. Your hands ache and bleed in places. You have accomplished less than a full day's work by Victorian standards, and you are already more physically depleted than you have ever been in your modern life. At the cottage, there is no hot shower to ease aching muscles. Instead, one might have a basin of cold water for a quick wash of face and hands before dinner. A simple meal might consist of potatoes, cabbage, and perhaps some salt pork, or bacon if one was fortunate. Meat was a luxury for farm laborers, often only available on Sundays or special occasions. Your vegetable garden and the animals you manage provide crucial supplements to this diet. Without them, malnutrition would be a constant companion, as it was for many poor rural families. The physical demands of farm labor required substantial calories, yet wages seldom stretched far enough to afford adequate nutrition. Following meals, evening chores remained, feeding the animals, chopping wood for the next day's fire, fetching water from the well or pump. Even children, if present, shared these duties. In a Victorian farm family, everyone labored. It is the only way to survive. When darkness is absolute, light comes only from a single candle or oil lamp, if resources allow. This dim light is incomparable to the brilliant electric lights you are used to. Reading, if you possess literacy, becomes a strain on your eyes, and all tasks requiring fine detail must await daylight. You collapse onto your bed, every muscle screaming, your hands throbbing, your back a mass of pain. Rest should come easily after such physical exertion. However, the bed poses another difficulty to modern tastes. The mattress is filled with straw that crackles with movement, is lumpy, and offers little support. The blankets are heavy but not very warm, and you might share the sleeping space with family or small animals in the cold. Lying in the darkness, the enormity of the chasm separating your modern existence from this Victorian reality weighs upon you. It is not merely physical hardship, but the relentless nature of it all, the certainty that tomorrow will bring the identical demands, and the day after, and every subsequent day. There are no weekends, no paid holidays, no sick leave. If you do not work, you will not eat. Regardless of how your body felt about the arrangement, farm laborers generally worked 6 full days a week, with only Sunday as a rest day. Animals still required tending even then. Holidays were scarce, focused on religious observances or harvest celebrations. The rhythm of life was dictated by the seasons and the sun, not the manufactured structure of the modern work week. And what happens when illness strikes, as it inevitably will in an era before antibiotics, modern sanitation, or effective medical treatments? A simple hand infection could lead to serious complications. A winter cold might develop into pneumonia. A broken bone from a fall could result in permanent disability. The robust health safety net of the modern world is absent here. There is no health insurance, no emergency rooms, no physical therapy to aid recovery. The cottage grows colder as night deepens. You might share it with mice, or worse, the bedbugs that were common, unwelcome Victorian bed inhabitants. Sleep arrives in fits and starts, your body too exhausted to remain awake, yet too pained to rest soundly. Before long, the first hint of dawn emerges, and the cycle restarts. This is the reality you have entered, a life defined by physical labor, scarce resources, and the constant pressure to produce enough for survival. Furthermore, we have neglected the uncertainties faced by Victorian farmers. A late frost could destroy newly planted crops, excessive rain could cause rot in the fields, insufficient rain might cause them to wither before harvest. Animal diseases could eliminate valuable livestock. The farmer you serve might experience a poor year, diminishing your already meager wages. The landowner might convert fields for more profitable uses, displacing tenant farmers and their laborers from employment. By the late Victorian era, agriculture was already deteriorating. Inexpensive imported grain from America and other regions undercut British farmers, leading many to financial ruin. The enclosure of common lands had already displaced many rural inhabitants from lands they traditionally used for grazing or gathering resources. Mechanization was starting to decrease the requirement for manual labor on larger farms. The migration from rural areas to cities, where factory jobs offered at least the chance of better wages, was actively progressing. Nevertheless, farming remained the foundation of English society throughout the Victorian era, sustained by the labor of farmers and farm workers. The rapidly expanding urban population faced starvation, and the Industrial Revolution that transformed Britain might have stalled due to a food shortage for its workforce. As you drift back to sleep before dawn, consider this. The life you just experienced was the reality for millions during the Victorian era. Their strength, resilience, and adaptability enabled the world we inhabit. The comforts we now assume, from ample food to labor-saving devices and medical care, are due to the hardships endured by generations past. Why wouldn't you survive a day as a Victorian farmer? It transcends mere physical demands, which are formidable. It involves a fundamentally different relationship with work, time, comfort, and survival. Modern life has shielded us from many of the harsh realities our ancestors encountered daily. We have lost the solaces, both literal and figurative, that made such a life endure. And yet the connection to the land, the seasons, and the direct results of one's labor offered by Victorian farming hold value in our modern world of abstraction and disconnection, where few produce tangible things and many are separated from nature by technology and urbanization. Perhaps there is a lesson in this demanding yet straightforward existence. Tomorrow, we will explore further aspects of Victorian farm life. The shifting seasons, the evolution of farming implements, and the social structures that defined rural communities. But now, as your muscles ache in sympathy with your imagined Victorian self, remember that past hardships have shaped present possibilities. The cottage is quiet, the fire reduced to glowing embers. Outside the stars wheel overhead the same stars that guided farmers for generations before electric lights dimmed their brilliance. In this state between wakefulness and dreams, the gap between then and now feels both immense and surprisingly brief. It reminds us that though human life's conditions shift greatly over time, the essential feelings of work, rest, struggle, and fulfillment stay profoundly familiar. Sleep well, recognizing that tomorrow, unlike your Victorian era, you can awaken to a world of choices and comforts unimaginable in the 1800s, the ultimate luxury. The weak morning sunlight streams through your cottage window, signaling a fresh day in your Victorian farming existence. As you stretch sore limbs and feel the strain of muscles unaccustomed to yesterday's work, the changing farm seasons unfold before you as an endless loop of struggles and small triumphs. Spring on a Victorian farm introduces both hope and danger. The winter's harshest days are behind us, and the land awaits new growth. However, this season requires the most physically demanding labor of the year, as fields are prepared and crops are sown that will not bear fruit for months. The agricultural year dictates all aspects of rural Victorian England. Each season presents its unique set of tasks, challenges, and small joys, all governed by the weather and the natural cycles of growth and harvest. Stepping outside, the morning air carries the earthy scent of soil warming under the spring sun. Today, like many days in early spring, we'll focus on the vital task of preparing the land for planting. However, first, there are the animals requiring attention, your daily companions in this Victorian farming existence. In the small barn beside your cottage, the cow moos softly, full, and prepared for the morning milking. Victorian farmers whom you are learning about maintained close relationships with their livestock. These animals were not merely sources of food and income, but often treated as extended family. Each had a name and personality known to their keepers. Your cow, Daisy, was more patient with your awkward milking attempts this morning. Your hands ached from yesterday's blisters. Struggling with the task, you begin to find the rhythm that allows the milk to flow more easily into the pail. The sound of milk striking the metal produces a soft musical ping that signals the start of each farming day. After milking, you strain the liquid through a clean cloth to remove any impurities. Cleanliness is highly valued, even in this era before germ theory was widely accepted. Some milk is reserved to allow the cream to separate for butter making, a task typically done by women and older children in the household. The remainder may be given to nearby houses if there is an adequate supply, providing a small but vital addition to one's income. After finishing the morning chores, you join the other farm workers heading to the fields. The tenant farmer who employs you approaches with a different task for the day. "We are sowing the spring wheat today," he explains, gesturing to several large sacks. The ground in the north field is ready. Spring sowing is a critical task that will determine the success or failure of the coming harvest. In the Victorian era, farming still relied on a deep understanding of soil, weather patterns, and timing passed down through generations. A canvas bag is handed to you, hanging from a strap across your body. You scoop grain from the sacks, precious seeds representing the farmer's investment in the future before mechanical seed drills were common. Many farmers still broadcast seeds by hand, a practice demanding skill and a measured walking pace. "Watch, Thomas," the farmer suggests, pointing to an older worker already moving across the field with practiced steps. Thomas delves into his bag, secures a cluster of seeds, and with a sweeping arm motion scatters them in a flawless arc across the earth. His actions are rhythmic and graceful. Step, reach, throw, step, reach, throw, covering the ground with remarkable steadiness. His initial efforts are less effective, seeds gather in some places and leave bare patches elsewhere. Thomas stops to offer guidance, advising, maintain a steady pace, and let your arm follow the identical path each time. It requires practice, but your body will internalize the memory. By noon, your arm tires from the repetitive motion, Yet you begin to find the rhythm, Thomas noted. The process becomes meditative once you settle in. The weight of the seeds in your hand, the trajectory of your throw, the soft patter as they fall onto the prepared earth. Behind the seed broadcasters are workers using harrows and large rake-like tools pulled by horses that cover the seeds with soil. This partnership between humans and animals is vital to Victorian farming. Horses are powerful draft animals, bred for strength and endurance. Often shy horses, such as Clydesdales, possess broad chests and thick, feathered legs that appear as moving pillars when pulling equipment across the fields. Working with these animals necessitates a relationship built on trust and clear communication. The ploughmen and drivers constantly communicate with their horses using special words and clicks to direct their movements, G for a right turn, L for a left turn, a specialized language developed over centuries of partnership. The horse's breath forms clouds in the cool spring air as they strain against their harnesses, their massive muscles rippling with effort. The metal harrow bounces and scrapes the freshly seeded ground, covering the grain and shielding it from birds circling overhead. As men worked the fields, women's labor was equally vital to the farm's success, though often unrecorded in history. Within the farmhouse and cottage, the farmer's wife and daughters, alongside female workers, managed a constant cycle of essential tasks. In the dairy, women churn butter and make cheese, tasks demanding strength, skill, and precise timing. The butter churn, a tall wooden barrel with a staff, requires vigorous, continuous pumping to convert cream into butter. This is an exhausting process, often taking hours of repetitive motion until the cream separates into butter globules. Cheese making is even more intricate, requiring meticulous temperature management. The introduction of rennet, an enzyme from calf stomachs that causes milk to separate into curds and whey, followed by pressing and aging of the final product. Good cheesemakers are highly valued, their skills often passed down through generations. Other women tend gardens, providing essential vegetables, preserve foods for winter, manage poultry, and handle the endless cycle of household tasks, including cooking, cleaning, washing, mending, and childcare. This domestic labor provides the foundation for uninterrupted fieldwork. As noon nears, the work in the field briefly stops for a midday meal. The farmer's wife and daughters arrive with baskets holding bread, cheese, cold bacon, and jugs of small beer or cider. The workers gather in the shade of a large oak at the field's edge. Grateful for the brief respite, the conversation shifted to the weather, as often happens among farmers whose livelihoods depend so directly on nature's whims. Observing the skies building in the west, Thomas might expect rain by evening. Weather forecasting in Victorian times relied not on satellites or computer models, but on accumulated patterns and natural signs. A red sky at night indicated a shepherd's delight, while a red sky in the morning was a shepherd's warning. The behavior of animals, the wind's direction, and cloud shapes all read like a constantly shifting almanac written in the sky. The good news about Victorian weather forecasting is that many farm labourers developed an almost uncanny knack for sensing impending changes. The bad news is that even the most skilled forecaster cannot avert the disasters that bad weather causes, such as late frosts that kill tender crops. Summer droughts wither them in the fields, or autumn rains rot harvests before they can be gathered. After this brief sustenance, work resumes with renewed purpose. The afternoon brings different tasks. Some workers continue sowing while others repair stone walls, marking field boundaries, or clean drainage ditches essential for preventing waterlogged soil. Drainage is a major issue on many British farms, where clay soils and heavy rainfall can easily lead to boggy conditions that prevent crop growth. During the 19th century, extensive systems of underground drainage tiles were implemented on numerous farms. Clay pipes were set in trenches to remove excess water from the fields. This involved arduous labor, requiring hands-on digging of deep trenches, careful placement of the tiles, and subsequent covering. As the afternoon progressed, dark clouds amassed on the western horizon, validating Thomas's forecast. The wind intensified, bringing the scent of impending rain. The farmer observed the sky with seasoned insight and ordered the workday to conclude sooner than expected. He instructed, "Get the tools in and the horses stable." This was clearly no mere spring shower. the urgency to secure equipment and bring animals in before the storm generated a flurry of activity. Valuable tools are collected and tallied. Iron implements demand a substantial investment from the farmer. The draft horses are unbridled and guided to the stable. Their daily labor is finished. You assist Thomas in guiding a massive Clydesdale named Thunder to his stall. The horse's hooves, each the size of a dinner plate, strike the stable floor heavily as he enters, visibly relieved. "Good lad," Thomas murmurs, stroking the animals' sweaty necks. "You have earned your rest today." The management of working animals was crucial in Victorian agriculture. Horses were significant financial assets and provided essential power for farming. Their sustenance, grooming, and health were paramount, even when human amenities were scarce. A quality draft horse could equal half a year's wages for a farmhand, and the loss of such an animal due to injury or sickness could be devastating for a small farm's viability. As Thomas feeds and waters the horses, he imparts knowledge from decades of farm work. He always checks their feet after a day's work, advising on how to lift and examine each massive hoof for stones or injuries, and observing their breathing. The first sign of trouble often reveals itself there. The warm, musky atmosphere of the stables provides a cozy shelter as the first heavy raindrops begin to fall outside. The sound rapidly grew from scattered drops to a steady drumming on the roof. Through the open stable door, you watched sheets of rain sweep across the newly sown fields. Good timing, Thomas nodded with satisfaction. Rain will help the seed settle in nicely. Even adverse weather has its place in the farming cycle when it arrives at the right moment. By the time you made the dash from the stable to your cottage, you were soaked through. The cold rain relentlessly struck your face, penetrating every seam of your clothing. Within the cottage, your family was preparing for the evening. A fire glowed in the grate, and the aroma of cooking offered welcome relief after the day's toil. Victorian farm dinners were simple, often centered on root vegetables such as potatoes and carrots, which kept well, supplemented by seasonal availability. In spring, early greens might emerge. Foraged plants like dandelion leaves, nettles, and other wild edibles offer welcome fresh nutrients after winter's limited diet. Meat is a luxury, appearing perhaps once or twice a week in small portions. As you eat, you reflect on how farming changes with each season. Spring focuses on preparation and planting, yielding rewards months later. Summer presents its own set of challenges. The continuous struggle against weeds that risk suffocating crops, the stewardship of livestock, and the vital hay harvest for winter feed. Haymaking is highly dependent on weather conditions. Grass must be cut when mature but before nutritional value is lost, then thoroughly dried for storage. Excessive rain during this phase can spoil the crop by causing rot instead of drying. The entire farm community unites for this crucial harvest, with everyone working to cut, turn, gather, and stack the hay. Autumn heralds the cereal harvests, wheat, barley, and oats, representing the culmination of the year's labor and the moment when a farm's fate is decided. The wheat you planted today won't be gathered until late summer or early autumn, with months of growth and vulnerability to weather, pests, and disease still remaining. The winter you have just left is a season of maintenance, not growth. It involves repairing tools and buildings, tending to livestock, and processing preserved foods necessary to sustain both humans and animals until spring arrives. Furthermore, it is the time when farm workers face the greatest unemployment as fewer hands are required for winter labor. Rain continues to beat against the cottage roof as night falls. There is comfort in staying indoors while the storm rages, even though the roof leaks in several places, necessitating strategically placed buckets to catch the drips. Your damp clothes hang near the fire to dry, prepared for tomorrow's work. Before sleep takes you, there is one final important task: checking on the animals. Bundling against the rain, you quickly go to the small barn where your cow and chickens are kept. Everything seems fine. The animals found refuge in their dry shelter, undisturbed by the storm. This consistent stewardship of livestock characterizes farm existence. Animals require constant attention, irrespective of weather or human ease. Their feeding, hydration, and welfare necessitate tending several times daily, establishing a routine that organizes the farmer's life around their requirements. The following morning arrived clear and fresh. the world refreshed by the night's rain. The air smells of damp earth and burgeoning life. Spring asserts itself more boldly after the rain. In the fields, puddles mirror the blue sky, yet the ground has soaked up much of the water, favorable for the fresh seeds. Today's job shifts. The farmer assigns you to assist with potato planting, another vital spring chore. Potatoes gained significant importance in Victorian agriculture, offering a nutritious and satiating crop that produced more food per acre than grain. For farm labourers and their families, potatoes frequently constituted the main diet, as their versatility and capacity for storage made them invaluable. The planting process required teamwork. One person dug trenches with a specialized plough, while others followed, dropping seed potatoes at set distances. A third group then covers the potatoes with soil, forming the raised ridges typical of potato fields. This requires precise work, paying attention to spacing and depth. Planting potatoes too closely causes them to compete for nutrients and space. Too far apart wastes valuable land. If the soil is too shallow, the plants risk damage from light or frost. If too deep, they will struggle to emerge. As you work, Thomas shares more of his farming wisdom. Do not plant before Good Friday, as he seriously advises that it brings bad luck to the crop. This blend of practical knowledge and superstition is common in Victorian farming communities, where Christian traditions, ancient folk beliefs, and generations of observed patterns merged into a complex guide for agricultural practice. Some beliefs have practical roots. Planting after Good Friday often avoids the worst spring frost. While others are purely superstitious, they follow with equal fidelity. Work continues until midday, your back aching from constant bending. Victorian farming tools, despite improvements throughout the 19th century, still demanded considerable physical effort from their users. The Industrial Revolution that reshaped manufacturing arrived later in agriculture, especially on smaller farms where expensive machinery was not economically feasible. Following the midday meal, you are introduced to a new novelty, a mechanical seed drill recently acquired by the farmer. This device, pulled by horses, creates furrows, deposits seeds at regular intervals, and covers them all in a single operation. What several workers would take all day to complete by hand can be done in hours with this machine. While Thomas comments on the future of farming, his tone suggests mixed feelings about the innovation for farm workers. Such machinery brings efficiency, but also the threat of reduced employment. A single machine operated by one man might replace several laborers, which is concerning in communities where alternative employment is scarce. By the 1860s, machinery began altering farming practices, with mechanical reapers for grain harvesting, faster threshing machines that separated grain from stalks than manual labor, and steam-powered equipment starting to supersede horsepower on extensive farms. However, adoption was not uniform, as many smaller farms persisted with traditional methods well into the late 19th century. As the afternoon yielded to evening, the physical cost of successive days of farm work became starkly evident. Your contemporary body, unaccustomed to such prolonged strain, protested with every motion. Muscles you never knew you possessed ached intensely, and your hands, despite their calluses, remained tender and sore. Victorian farm labourers cultivated a physical conditioning that modern people can scarcely conceive. Years of manual labour from youth-forged bodies adapted to specific tasks. Broad shoulders and strong backs suited ploughing. Nimble fingers enabled detailed tasks like shearing or milking. Endurance supported 12-hour workdays throughout the growing season. Your body would eventually adapt to these demands if you remained in this role. However, this adaptation often incurred a cost: joint problems, early arthritis, and other physical ailments that frequently afflicted aging agricultural workers. The medical realities of Victorian rural life starkly contrast with modern expectations. Minor injuries, such as cuts, sprains, or broken bones, could be debilitating or life-threatening, unlike today. Before antibiotics and modern medical procedures, farm accidents were common and often serious. Horses could kick or trample, machinery could catch clothing or limbs, and tools could slip with devastating consequences. Even without accidents, the cumulative toll of hard physical labor gradually aged workers prematurely. When illness arose, treatment options were scarce. Local doctors, if present, often lacked effective medications and diagnostic instruments. Consequently, many rural families depended mainly on traditional remedies, herbal preparations, pickuses, and generational treatments, which offered varying degrees of efficacy and medical value. The evening introduces another facet of Victorian farm life, the social bonds that united rural communities. As the day's labor concludes, another worker notes that the blacksmith's forge will remain open late, drawing several farmers. The village blacksmith is thus a vital support for agricultural communities. Not only does he craft and mend vital metal tools and implements, his forge also functions as an informal hub, where news is shared, deals are struck, and community ties are reinforced. The blacksmith's shop radiates orange light as you draw near. The rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil echoes from afar. Within, the forge's heat offers a welcome warmth against the cool spring evening. Several local farmers and workers have already gathered, perched on makeshift seats or leaning against walls while talking. These informal gatherings serve multiple purposes in rural Victorian society. They allow for the exchange of practical information, weather observations, reports of crop conditions, and news of livestock diseases to watch for. They also provide opportunities for workers to hear about employment possibilities or for farmers to arrange labor for upcoming busy periods. And most significantly, they provide connection and community in an era preceding electronic communications and mass media. The conversations you hear address local issues, a nearby farmer's struggles following a poor harvest last year, speculation on market prices for the upcoming season, and discussions of new farming methods being tested on a large estate several miles away. Politics occasionally enters discussions, especially regarding cheap grain imports from America that increasingly threaten British farmers' livelihoods. This economic pressure began transforming British agriculture during the Victorian period. The repeal of the Corn Laws in 1846 removed tariff protections for British grain, opening markets to foreign competition, particularly as transportation improved with steamships crossing the Atlantic. American grain from large mechanized farms began overwhelming British markets with lower prices than local farmers could compete with. This led to a slow but significant change in British farming methods. Many farmers transitioned from grain cultivation to raising livestock and dairy, sectors facing less foreign competition. Others implemented new technologies and techniques to enhance efficiency and lower expenses. As evening deepened, the blacksmith finished mending a broken plowshare, the metal hissing as he submerged it in water to cool. The talk turned to lighter subjects, recounting the local cricket team's recent game, cricket growing increasingly popular, even in the countryside, plans for the upcoming May Day festivities, soft teasing between old friends. You observed how dialect and local phrases colored the conversation around you. Victorian rural communities frequently preserved unique local vocabularies, especially for farming tools and methods. An item named in Kent might have a completely different term in Yorkshire, reflecting the isolation of communities before modern transport and communication unified language. Night deepens and people start heading home, anticipating another early start with the dawn. You return to your cottage under a star-filled sky, a stark contrast to modern life. Lacking electric lighting, there is no light pollution. In rural areas, the night sky reveals astronomical features now only visible in the most remote places. At the cottage, preparing for sleep is simple. Washing with basin water, donning night clothes that serve as undergarments, and banking the fire for warmth through the night. The rhythm of the farming day, rising early, working in daylight, and retiring early, follows patterns set by the fundamental needs of agricultural life, not arbitrary modern schedules. As you settle onto the straw mattress, body fatigue quickly surpasses the discomfort of the bed. Moonlight spills soft shadows through the small window. The only sounds are the occasional lowing of cattle in nearby fields, the soft murmur of wind in the trees, and the distant hoot of an owl hunting across moonlit meadows. This sensory landscape of Victorian rural nights is broken only by the moon, stars, and perhaps distant lantern light. The naturalness of sounds, unmarred by engines or electronics, and the earthy scents of soil, animals, and growth forge an environment starkly different from modern nights, defined by artificial light, manufactured sounds, and detachment from natural processes. Sleep arrives swiftly, filling you with dreams of this new reality. The weight of iron tools in your hands, the scent of freshly turned earth, and the rhythmic passage of horses across fields. The texture of seeds slips through your fingers as you scatter them into furrows that, with time and favorable weather, will yield the sustenance sustaining this society. Morning breaks with the first light of dawn and the crow of roosters. Another day of Victorian farm life commences, a day that might involve potato planting, fence mending, animal tending, or building repair. All are parts of the endless cycle of tasks necessary to maintain the farm's productivity. As spring yields to early summer, the fruits of prior labor are visible. Tender green shoots emerge in the wheat fields, potato plants rise in orderly rows, and fruit trees in the orchard behind the farmhouse burst with blossoms promising autumn harvest. There is a deep satisfaction in witnessing these tangible outcomes of effort, a directness to the relationship between work and reward that is often absent in modern occupations. Victorian farmers faced uncontrollable challenges like weather, pests, diseases, and economic forces. Yet they witnessed the direct payoff of their labor in the crops and thriving animals they raised. This link to natural cycles and tangible results imbued their work with meaning, offering something increasingly absent in the industrial jobs pulling many rural workers to cities during this era, despite the physical strain and limited material gains. A sense of purpose and connection to both land and community, transcending mere economic transaction. As you move through the tasks of this new day, your body still aches, but perhaps begins to adapt to its new demands. You reflect on these deeper aspects of Victorian farm life. The challenges, along with the rhythms, connections, and satisfactions of an agricultural existence, are increasingly giving way to an industrial future that will transform British society in ways that are both promising and problematic for those whose lives were tied to the land and its seasons. The warm sun of early summer bathes the farmland in golden light as you step outside your cottage. Several weeks have elapsed since your arrival in Victorian farming, and the landscape has changed with the advancing season. The wheat fields, once bare soil when you helped with sowing, now ripple with knee-high green stalks. The vegetable garden beside your cottage thrives with rows of peas climbing supports, potato plants spreading leaves, and cabbages forming tight heads among the rich soil. Your body has also begun a transformation. The blisters on your hands have hardened into calluses, offering some defense against the constant friction of tools and ropes. Muscles that once cried out against daily toil now accept their fate more calmly. Though the labor remains demanding beyond anything in your modern life, you have developed what Victorian farmers termed condition. The lean, supple strength forged through sustained physical work instead of conscious exercise. Today introduces a new and vital summer task, haymaking. The sweet scent of moor grass wafts across the farm as you reach the meadow where work is already in progress. Haymaking is crucial to Victorian farming prosperity as the dried grass provides winter feed when fresh grazing ceases. It is also one of the most weather-sensitive and collaborative activities of the farming year. The farmer announced with evident satisfaction that 3 good days of sunshine were ahead, perfect timing for the hay harvest. This favorable weather is crucial because the cut grass must dry thoroughly before storage. Hay gathered while still damp can heat up in storage, potentially causing spontaneous combustion that could destroy barns and result in fatalities. Many Victorian farmers lost everything to such fires, turning the year's good fortune into disaster in a single night. The haymaking process starts by cutting the grass, a task traditionally accomplished using scythes. Even as mechanical mowers became available mid-Victorian, many smaller farms continued to depend on these ancient hand tools. You see Thomas and other skilled workers swing their scythes in long, smooth arcs, the curved blades slicing through the grass with a hypnotic rhythm. This is an art that requires years of mastery. The mower requires the blade to maintain the correct angle, the swing to follow the right arc, and a steady forward speed, while ensuring the blade is sharp enough to cut cleanly instead of tearing the grass. A good mower moves with an almost dance-like quality, utilizing the whole body rather than just arm strength to power the blade. "Would you like to try?" Thomas asks, noticing your observation and offering his scythe, showing you how to grip the wooden handles, the nibs, or snaths. Position yourself along the curved wooden shaft. Your initial attempts will be awkward. The blade may catch the ground or graze the grass without cutting it. Keep your body turning smoothly, as Thomas advises, demonstrating the gentle twisting motion that generates swing power. Allow the blade to perform the work, do not force it. After several frustrating attempts, you find the rhythm, experiencing brief moments when everything aligns and the blade slices cleanly through a swath of grass. It is profoundly satisfying. This direct connection between your body's movement and the transformation of the landscape occurs unmediated by engines or electronics. While men cut the grass, women and children spread it out with wooden rakes and pitchforks to dry evenly in the sun. The turning of the hay occurs multiple times daily, exposing wet undersides to the sun's heat. This process demands good weather for at least 2 or 3 consecutive days, a blessing often absent in England's unpredictable climate. The meadow transforms into a centre of activity, with workers of all ages engaging in this crucial harvest. Young children, too small for strenuous work, run errands, fetch water, or drive away birds that might be drawn by insects disturbed by the cutting. Older children learned skills essential for their farming lives alongside adults. This intergenerational work environment characterized much of Victorian rural life, contrasting with modern segregated schools and workplaces. Communities functioned as unified bodies where everyone contributed according to their ability from a young age. Children as young as 6 or 7 had meaningful roles in farm work, gradually taking on greater responsibility as they matured. The system's advantage was the direct transfer of skills and knowledge across generations, fostering deep competence in agricultural practices. However, the drawback was the limited formal education for farm children, many of whom attended school infrequently or not at all, their learning subordinated to immediate farm demands. By the mid-Victorian era, efforts to enhance rural education were commencing. The Education Act of 1870 set the stage for schooling children aged 5 to 13, though universal and compulsory education was not achieved until the early 20th century. In the 1860s, many farm children still learned only basic literacy and numeracy before being called to full-time work. As noon nears, the farmer's wife and daughters arrive at the meadow's edge with baskets and jugs, bringing the midday meal for the haymakers. Haymaking days traditionally involve superior food. Recognizing the intensive labor, instead of typical bread and cheese, there might be cold meat, pies or cake, accompanied by the ever-present cider or small beer. The meal is eaten in the shade of hedges or trees at the field's edge. Workers lounge on the sweet-smelling cut grass while eating, conversation flows easily, shared labor fostering camaraderie across usual social divisions. Even the farmer might join the workers for this meal instead of eating separately. The urgent communal harvest work temporarily bridged class distinctions. After the brief rest, work resumed with greater urgency. The afternoon sun was hot, and you felt sweat soaking through your shirt as you helped turn partially dried hay with a wooden rake. The physical demands were considerable, yet haymaking possessed a festive quality not found in solitary tasks. The collaborative effort, the understanding that every contribution is vital to the final result, and the pleasure of watching the meadow shift as neat rows of drying hay replace the standing grass. By late afternoon, Thomas declares that the hay dried earliest is ready to be gathered into haycocks, small conical piles that shield the hay from dew while permitting continued drying. You learn to gather armfuls of hay and arrange them with stems pointing outward and downward, creating structures that will shed rain if unexpected showers come during the night. The hay dots the field like small golden tents as the day's work concludes. Tomorrow, if the weather holds, the turning and drying will continue, with the earliest cut hay possibly ready for storage by day's end. As you walk toward your cottage in the evening light, your body aching but satisfied with the day's accomplishments, you notice activity at a neighboring farm. A horse-drawn wagon loaded with various goods is pulling away, and several people stand talking in the yard. That's the traveling peddler, Thomas explains, following your gaze. He comes through every few weeks with goods from town. These traveling salesmen delivered news and occasionally letters to those with family away, bridging the gap before rural mail, village shops, and easy town transportation. They established vital connections between isolated farms and the wider world, carrying everything from textiles and simple medicines to tools and luxury goods like sugar or spices not locally produced. In addition to the merchandise they traded, peddlers functioned as informal news networks, relaying stories and information between communities. In an era preceding telephones, radio, or television, these human links were vital conduits for gaining knowledge about events outside one's immediate area. "He'll likely be at the village tomorrow," Thomas continued, referencing the market day. The weekly market in the nearest village or small town represented another crucial institution in Victorian rural life. For numerous farm families, market day offered the sole regular chance to sell excess crops, acquire necessities, and engage with the community beyond their immediate neighbors. The following morning, after finishing essential morning tasks, you receive leave to attend the village market. It is a 3-mile walk along lanes lined with hedges bearing white hawthorn blossoms. The air is sweet with their fragrance and vibrant with insects buzzing among the flowers. As you approach the village, the market is heard before it is seen. A cacophony of human voices, animal sounds, and general commotion signals this important weekly gathering. The village centre has transformed from its usual quietude into a bustling hub of commerce and social life. Farmers display their produce on rough wooden tables or directly from the backs of carts, including vegetables, fruit, eggs, butter, cheese, and occasionally meat. Livestock sellers gather in a single area. Their sheep, pigs, or cattle were temporarily penned for inspection by potential buyers. Craftsmen offer practical items such as baskets, pottery, or wooden implements needed for farm and household tasks. The transactions you observe rely less on currency than you might expect. While coins facilitate some transactions, many exchanges involve direct bartering, such as trading eggs for cloth, labor for tools, or surplus farm produce for preserves or other necessities. This informal economy operates alongside formal cash transactions, forming a resilient system enabling community members to meet their needs even during financial scarcity, relying on direct relationships and trust developed over years of interaction, unlike anonymous modern commerce. Beyond economics, market day fulfills vital social functions, providing a space for farm families who may rarely see anyone outside their immediate household. Use this time to share news, plan future collaboration, address shared issues, seek counsel, and preserve the community ties vital for rural survival. You observe that these interactions adhere to unspoken yet discernible social patterns. The farmer's wife, who sells butter and eggs, greets various customers with slight variations in demeanor, mirroring their respective social standings. A prosperous tenant farmer receives a difference from laborers, while showing respect to the local landowner who briefly visits the market. Children weave through the crowd on errands for parents, already learning the complex social choreography that will guide their adult interactions. While browsing the market stalls, you overhear conversations revealing common concerns of Victorian farming communities. "Lost 3 lambs to that fox," one shepherd tells another. Wildlife predation posed a serious threat to farm profits, as foxes, weasels, and birds of prey preyed upon poultry and young livestock. Furthermore, concerns arose regarding crop diseases. "My neighbor's potatoes are already showing blight, and I hope it does not spread this year." The potato blight that triggered the devastating Irish famine in the 1840s was a terrifying prospect for British farmers, as it could wipe out entire harvests in a matter of days. Animal diseases caused even greater dread because they could rapidly infect valuable livestock. Keep your new cow isolated for 2 weeks. An experienced farmer advised a novice who had just acquired an animal, ensure she brings nothing onto your farm. Without modern veterinary medicines, diseases such as foot and mouth, anthrax, or bovine tuberculosis could devastate a farm's economy and pose a risk to humans. These common concerns, predators, plant diseases, and animal illnesses constantly threatened agricultural success, necessitating vigilance, traditional knowledge, and community information sharing for effective management. The market acted as an informal clearinghouse for crucial information, spreading warnings and solutions across the farming community. As midday neared, the square's pub gathered farmers and traders for a respite from their commerce. Although Victorian temperance efforts were emerging to change drinking customs, alcohol remained fundamental to rural social life. Beer or cider was a normal daily consumption for working men, providing necessary calories and hydration for physical labor. Inside the pub, conversations became louder and more animated as drinks flowed. You also observed another vital aspect of market day: the negotiation of labor arrangements and land usage. A farmer hired extra help for an upcoming harvest, and two neighbors settled a dispute concerning drainage between their fields. A barrel maker or cooper would supply new containers for the autumn apple pressing in exchange for payment partly in cash and partly in the resulting cider. These informal agreements, often sealed by a handshake, established the working framework of rural communities. Without formal contracts, these verbal agreements were enforced by the community. Breaking one's word risked reputational damage and made finding work or trading partners difficult. As the afternoon advanced, the market began to close. Farmers loaded unsold goods back into carts. Livestock were led to their destinations, and the village gradually settled into its customary quiet. You bought a few small items: a bone comb, thread for mending, and a precious orange for a rare treat back at the cottage before starting the walk home. The road back to the farm provided time to reflect on the social complexity you had observed. Despite its simplicity compared to modern urban life, Victorian rural society functioned through intricate systems of mutual support, obligation, status recognition, and information exchange. These systems, developed over generations, fostered resilience in communities confronting continuous challenges from weather, disease, and economic pressures. Returning to the farm, you discover haymaking continuing in your absence. The hay is drying well under the persistent sunshine, and preparations are underway to gather it for winter storage. This process requires either building large haystacks in the field or transporting the hay to the barn for careful arrangement, maximizing storage space and ensuring proper ventilation. Constructing a proper haystack is a specialized skill, demanding that the stack shed water via precisely angled sides and top, maintain its shape through settling, and allow for internal airflow to prevent dangerous heat buildup. The foremost builders of haystacks are respected specialists within farming communities. Their expertise highly sought during the harvest season. You join the crew loading dried hay onto a wagon for transport to the barn. Using pitchforks, workers lift forkfuls of hay to a person atop the growing pile on the wagon, who arranges it to create a stable, balanced load. It is hot, dusty work. Hay particles fill the air, adhering to sweat, damp skin, and working their way into clothing. Many workers cover their noses and mouths with handkerchiefs to avoid breathing dust, which can cause respiratory problems from long-term exposure. A loaded wagon pulled by two massive draft horses creaks under its weight as it moves slowly toward the barn. There the unloading begins. This is a reversal of the loading, with hay pitched from the wagon into the barn loft, where it is carefully arranged for storage. Workers develop coordinated movement patterns over years of shared labor, minimizing wasted motion and maximizing efficiency in a way no manual could record. As golden evening light crosses the farmyard, the day's final wagon load is secured in the barn. The crew shares palpable satisfaction with the completed work. This hay guarantees the farm animals' winter sustenance, ensuring security for the dependent humans. Later, as you wash the day's dust and sweat from your cottage basin with water, you reflect on another crucial aspect of Victorian farming: its vulnerability to uncontrollable forces. Despite the skill, knowledge, and labor invested in agricultural production, success or failure ultimately depended on factors farmers could influence but never fully master. Weather was the most immediate and visible of these factors. A late spring frost could destroy fruit blossoms, negating a year's harvest overnight. Summer drought could wither crops in the fields. Excessive rain could rot harvests before gathering. Hail could flatten standing grain in minutes. Early winter storms could kill livestock exposed. Against these dangers, Victorian farmers had developed weather prediction systems using centuries of observation. Experienced farm workers interpreted cloud patterns, wind direction, animal behavior, and other natural signs as texts. While these traditional methods held value, they were imperfect, leaving farmers vulnerable to sudden weather changes. Market forces added further uncertainty, as the prices farmers received for crops or livestock shifted based on factors beyond their local control. The income of rural producers was affected by harvests in other regions. Import policies, transportation costs, urban demand, and broader economic conditions. Factors that were difficult to predict or control from an isolated rural perspective. During the Victorian era, these economic pressures grew stronger as agriculture became more commercialized and integrated into national and international markets. The railway network's rapid expansion across Britain in the mid-9th century offered market access, yet simultaneously exposed local producers to competition from distant sources, especially as shipping advanced and grain from North America and meat from Australia entered British markets. New technologies thus presented Victorian farmers with both opportunities and challenges. Mechanical reapers, threshers, seed drills, and other innovations boosted efficiency but demanded capital investment beyond the reach of many smaller farms. Those who could afford the new machinery gained competitive advantages, while others struggled to keep up with traditional methods in a growingly mechanized agricultural economy. These intersecting vulnerabilities to weather, market forces, technological shifts, and numerous other factors generated a state of continuous uncertainty for Victorian farming communities. Consequently, they established complex social support systems ranging from informal labor exchanges to organized friendly societies that offered basic insurance against illness or burial expenses. As night descends outside your cottage window, the farm falls silent, save for the occasional animal sounds. Another day of Victorian agricultural life ends, marking a small portion in the ancient cycle of growth, harvest, and renewal that has shaped human experience since the earliest settlements. You have begun to comprehend within your body and mind what it meant to live within this cycle as a Victorian farmer. The physical demands, the specialized knowledge, the social interconnections, the seasonal rhythms, and the constant negotiation with forces beyond human control. This understanding, gained through direct experience rather than abstract learning, offers insight into a world increasingly remote from modern life, yet remains foundational to the society we have inherited. Sleep follows quickly after the day's exertion. Your dreams are filled with the sensory richness of this Victorian rural life, the smell of fresh hay, the texture of soil between your fingers, the sound of cicadas slicing through grass, the taste of simple food satisfying honest hunger, and the sight of stars wheeling above the fields your labor helped cultivate. The calendar turns to August, and the Victorian farming landscape transforms once more. The haymaking you undertook earlier in the summer is successfully finished. The barn's loft is filled with sweet-smelling dried grass, which will sustain the farm's animals through the winter. Now arrives the most critical period of the farming year, the grain harvest. Dawn is earlier than desired. After another night of deep sleep, born of physical exhaustion, the roosters have not yet started their morning calls. As you rise, quickly dress in the pre-dawn darkness and step outside your cottage. The air now carries a distinct quality, still warm, yet foreshadowing that summer's heat will soon yield to autumn's cooler embrace. Today marks the start of the wheat harvest, the culmination of labor that began months ago when you helped sow these same fields. Golden stalks stand tall across the land, their heavy heads nodding gently in the morning breeze. This harvest is not merely sustenance, but the economic survival of the farm and its laborers. A successful yield ensures security for the coming year. A poor one risks hardship or ruin. You gather with other workers near the barn, where the farmer distributes tools and assigns sections of the field to various teams. Despite the rise of mechanical reapers by the 1860s, many farms, particularly smaller ones, still relied on manual harvesting using tools familiar to farmers from centuries prior. Thomas offers you a sickle, a curved blade affixed to a short wooden handle. Unlike the long-handled scythe used for haymaking, the sickle demands the user bend low, grasping sheaves of wheat stalks with one hand while cutting them with the other. It is precise, yet slow work, demanding more effort on the back than anything else. Have you used one before? Thomas asks, though he knows the answer. When you shake your head, he demonstrates the proper technique, grasping a handful of wheat stems with his left hand. He cuts them with a smooth motion of the sickle in his right, then carefully places the cut stalks aside where they will be gathered into sheaves. Don't waste any stalks. He advises that every grain counts. This meticulousness reflects the worth assigned to the harvest. Before global supply chains and food security, waste was not just inefficient, it jeopardized survival. Victorian farm laborers devised methods to maximize yield from every field, gathering crops with a thoroughness modern machinery cannot equal. You follow Thomas into the field, joining a line of workers moving steadily through the standing wheat. The labor demands a rhythm. Grab, cut, place, which your body gradually learns after several clumsy attempts. Morning dew soaks your lower legs as you move through the crop, and tiny insects disturbed from their homes in the wheat field fly up around you. Behind the reapers follow the gatherers, often women and older children, who collect the cut stalks into bundles called sheaves. These are bound with twisted wheat strands, a technique demanding great skill to create bindings tight enough to endure further handling. As the sun rises, bathing the harvesting teams in golden light, the temperature quickly escalates. By midday, sweat runs down your face and back, and your knees and back ache from the constant bending required by the sickle. This is why many farms adopted mechanical reapers as soon as they were available, not only for efficiency, but also to lessen the physical strain on workers. Cyrus McCormick patented the first mechanical reaper in America in 1834, with further improvements made over the following decades. By the 1860s, while horse-drawn reapers were common on larger British farms, their cost made them inaccessible to many smaller operations. These initial machines cut the standing grain, yet still demanded laborers to manually gather and tie the cut stalks. Near noon, activity was observed at the field's far end. A nearby farmer arrived with a mechanical reaper, eager to expedite the harvest. The farmer employing you consented to this arrangement, likely in exchange for wages or assistance with neighboring harvests. The machine is an impressive sight. A wheeled platform drawn by two sturdy horses, equipped with mechanical arms that sweep the standing grain against cutting blades. A seat above enables the operator to control both the horses and the cutting mechanism. As it moves across the field, the reaper harvests a swath of wheat far wider than a single worker with a sickle could achieve, dramatically increasing harvesting speed. As you proceed, Thomas comments beside you, watching the machine with a mix of appreciation and worry. It undoubtedly speeds up the work, but requires fewer laborers. His observation strikes at the core conflict of agricultural mechanization during this time. Greater efficiency was achieved at the expense of rural employment, fueling the migration from the countryside to cities that defined the Victorian era. For the rest of the day, you collaborate with the mechanical reaper, gathering and binding the stalks it cuts but leaves behind. Despite this machine aid, harvesting is still labor-intensive, as each sheaf needs careful binding before being grouped into sets of 8 to 10 called STOs or shocks. These distinctive formations, resembling small tines scattered across the harvested fields, allow the grain to continue drying before the next processing stage. Wheat requires several days in these storage silos, depending on the weather, before it is dry enough for storage. During this critical time, farmers anxiously monitor the sky. Rain could ruin the harvest, causing the grain to sprout in the husk or develop mold, making it worthless. By evening, almost half the wheat field has been harvested. This is good progress for the first day, but several more days of intensive work are needed to secure the entire crop. As you return to your cottage, muscles sore from the unfamiliar exertions the sickle demanded. You pass women and children gathering in the harvested fields, carefully collecting individual stalks of grain missed during the main harvest. This practice of gleaning has ancient origins referenced in the Bible and is acknowledged in British common law as a right of the rural poor to collect leftover grain after the harvest. It significantly supplemented the diets of the poorest community members, especially widows and children lacking male breadwinners. Despite attempts by landowners and farmers to limit gleaning, the practice persisted throughout the Victorian era, demonstrating both rural poverty and community support systems that lessened its harshest impacts. The following morning introduces another facet of the harvest, the communal meal. The farmer's wife and daughters, with help from women from nearby farms, prepared food for the harvest workers. This tradition of the harvest feast recognized the vital nature of the labor and the need to sustain the workers during the most demanding time of the agricultural year. The midday meal was eaten in the shade of a large oak by the field's edge, consisting of bread, cheese, cold meats, pies, vegetables from the kitchen garden, and plenty of beer or cider. Unlike the usual daily fare, harvest meals frequently featured meat and special dishes set aside for this significant occasion. The quality and abundance of the harvest feast symbolized not only practical necessities, but also the symbolic weight of harvest as a communal event, rather than just an economic activity. As you share the meal with other workers, discussions naturally turn to past and present harvests. Remember the summer of '53? An older worker asks. Rain for 3 weeks straight during the wheat harvest caused half the crop to sprout. Others recall this agricultural disaster that affected many farms in the region and the dry summer 2 years prior. Another adds that the wheat was hardly worth cutting due to the poor yield. These shared memories of good and bad harvests form part of the community's collective knowledge, creating a perspective that extends beyond individual experience to encompass decades of agricultural cycles. Following a brief meal break, work resumes with renewed urgency. The wheat in the field must be cut before changing weather endangers it, and the harvested portions require monitoring for proper drying. The entire community focuses on this single priority, securing the harvest for sustenance through the coming year. Subsequent days are marked by similar intensive labor from dawn to dusk. Once properly dried in the field, the sheaves are loaded onto wagons for transport to the barn or stackyard. There they might be built into carefully constructed stacks for long-term storage, or prepared for immediate threshing to separate the valuable grain from the stalks and chaff. Threshing, the process that extracts edible grain from the harvested plant, evolved significantly during the Victorian period. The ancient method of flailing, which involved beating dried stalks with jointed wooden tools called flails, persisted on some farms, especially for smaller harvests or specific grains. This manual threshing was strenuous labor, usually done inside barns during winter when fieldwork was restricted. Mechanical threshing machines, initially powered by horses walking in circles to drive gears and later by portable steam engines, gradually supplanted hand flailing on many farms. These machines dramatically increased efficiency but introduced new dangers. Moving parts could snag clothing or limbs, and many Victorian farm workers suffered serious injuries or death from threshing machine accidents. You observe a horse-powered threshing machine operating at a neighboring farm, with horses harnessed to a horizontal wheel walking in endless circles, their motion transferred via gears to power the threshing mechanism. Workers feed sheaves into one end of the machine, which beats and separates the grain through a series of internal operations before ejecting straw from another opening and allowing grain to fall through screens into collection containers. The dust from threshing creates a hazy atmosphere around the operation, coating workers' clothing and skin with fine particles that enter their eyes, noses, and lungs. This threshing dust caused respiratory issues common among agricultural workers, especially those in threshing rolls. After threshing, the grain must be further cleaned to remove chaff and weed seeds before storage or market preparation. Women frequently used flat baskets, known as winnowing fans, for this winnowing process to toss grain into the air, letting the breeze remove lighter chaff while heavier grain settled back into the basket. Mechanical winnowing machines employing fan-generated airflow gradually replaced this manual method during the Victorian era. Following the wheat harvest, other grains like barley, oats, and rye are gathered. These grains share similar processes of cutting, drying, and threshing, although the timing differs slightly due to varying maturation rates. By September, the grain harvests are finished and focus shifts to other autumn crops. Root vegetables such as potatoes, turnips, and mangolds, a type of beet grown mainly for animal feed, require excavation and storage for winter. Apples, pears, and other fruits are harvested from orchards, some are eaten immediately, while most are preserved by drying, making cider or perry, or storing in cool, dark areas to extend their usability throughout winter. These autumn harvests, though less dramatic than the grain gathering that came before, are equally vital to the farm's yearly cycle. Root crops in particular offered crucial winter feed for livestock when fresh grass was scarce, enabling animals to endure the cold months instead of being slaughtered in autumn, as was typical in earlier times. With these provisions secured, Victorian farms initiated preparations for the subsequent agricultural cycle. Fields were ploughed once more, mixing stubble from harvested crops back into the earth. Winter wheat might be sown in autumn, their seeds germinating before the cold halted growth prepared to develop with spring's arrival. These interwoven cycles, the end of harvesting coinciding with preparation for future planting, reflected the continuous flow of agricultural existence. Unlike modern work with its clear project boundaries, farming was an unbroken chain of related activities. Each season's work built upon the last, laying groundwork for the next. As autumn approaches, shifts in farm life's social patterns become apparent. With the most intense harvest work finished, community gatherings become more frequent. Harvest suppers, church festivals and fairs punctuate the season. These festivities offer both gratitude for the successful harvest and chances for community unity before winter's solitude. The harvest supper is the most important of these assemblies. It is a meal offered by the farmer to everyone who labored on the harvest, irrespective of their usual standing. For one night, social differences fade as all who contributed to securing the crop share food, drink, and festivity at a single table. Songs, stories, games, and dancing usually follow the meal, fostering a festive mood that recognizes the community's shared success. You attend such a supper at the farm, seated at a long table in the largest barn, cleared and adorned for the event. Lanterns cast a warm glow over the assembled workers and their families. The farmer stands to express gratitude for their work and the successful harvest. A rare public acknowledgement of the interdependence sustaining agricultural success despite social hierarchies. The meal comprised the best local produce, roast meats, fresh and preserved vegetables, homemade breads, pies and puddings, accompanied by copious amounts of cider and beer. For many laborers, this constituted the most plentiful meal of the year, a fleeting experience of abundance often marked by the careful management of scarce resources. After a meal, tables are cleared to create space for dancing. An elderly farm worker produces a fiddle and a concertina, and simple country dances commence. These are not the formal ballroom dances of urban Victorian society, but traditional patterns inherited through generations. Circle dances, reels and jigs that enable community participation regardless of age or skill. As evening deepens, older workers share tales of past harvests, weaving agricultural wisdom into narratives. These oral traditions safeguard practical knowledge, weather signs, planting methods, and animal husbandry while strengthening community identity through shared history and experience. Listen as Thomas recounts the 1845 harvest when potato blight first struck the region. Crops fine one day, black and stinking the next. He recalls no warning, no remedy. Those who relied on potatoes starved that winter. His account functions as both a historical record and a cautionary narrative concerning agricultural fragility, highlighting how swiftly conditions shift despite human endeavor and proficiency. Celebrations end sooner than contemporary festivities. Farm labor persists irrespective of festivities, and the morning will bring its customary demands. Through lantern-lit lanes, the community spreads to cottages and farmhouses scattered across the landscape, carrying memories of shared celebration to sustain them through the coming months of isolated winter work. Back in your cottage, preparing for sleep after the evening's unusual social activity, you reflect on the Victorian agricultural cycle that structures rural life: spring planting, summer tending, and autumn harvesting. Each season offered distinct demands and rewards, establishing a varied yet predictable rhythm that starkly contrasts with the ceaseless, season-independent pace of contemporary work. This agricultural calendar governed every facet of rural life, influencing daily schedules, social events, economic arrangements, and religious observances. The church calendar, which structured Victorian religious life, closely mirrored these agricultural patterns. These major festivals align with natural cycles of planting, harvest, death, and renewal. As autumn progresses toward winter, the rhythm of farm work noticeably shifts. Field labor decreases as crops are secured and the soil becomes less workable. Attention then turns to maintenance, repairing buildings and equipment, managing stored crops, and caring for livestock, which are increasingly confined due to limited grazing. Historically, these winter months offered time for secondary occupations that supplemented agricultural incomes. Crafts such as basket making, wood carving, or textile production could be performed indoors during poor weather. These varied skills remained vital in Victorian rural communities despite growing industrial specialization in cities. These quieter months provide an opportunity to reflect on Victorian agricultural life, examining its physical demands, specialized knowledge, social structures, and profound connection to natural cycles. Your modern perspective enables you to recognize aspects of this world that its inhabitants might overlook. The resilience needed to confront constant uncertainty and the interdependence that sustained communities through hardship. The knowledge held through generations of direct engagement with the land. As you drift towards sleep, the sounds of the Victorian countryside offer a gentle backdrop. The distant lowing of cattle settled for the night, the soft hooting of an owl hunting across moonlit fields, and the barely perceptible creaking of the cottage responding to the night air. These sounds embody the agricultural landscape at rest, the brief stillness between cultivation cycles that have defined human existence since our earliest settlements. Tomorrow will bring new tasks suited to the advancing season, each feeding the complex food system that sustained Victorian society through periods of remarkable change. Your body, increasingly accustomed to this life of physical labor, will meet these challenges with growing competence. While the divide between modern comfort and Victorian farming reality is often unbridgeable, the continuous nature of agricultural labor, lacking clear endpoints or permanent achievements, is both its main challenge and profound fulfillment. Unlike modern jobs that yield finished goods or completed projects, farming involves participation in ongoing natural processes, temporary stewardship rather than permanent creation or ownership. This fundamental difference underpins many facets of Victorian rural mentality that appear alien to modern sensibilities. The acceptance of uncontrollable factors, a multi-generational view of land management, and a focus on sustainability and continuity over immediate maximization of yields or profits. These divergences reveal not just technological constraints, but deep shifts in how people perceive their connection to nature and their position within economic and social structures. As sleep takes hold, your mind is filled with visions from your time in this Victorian agricultural world: golden wheat in summer breezes, a scythe arc cutting meadow grass, draft horses straining under harness, pulling plows through stubborn earth. Community members collaborate to secure harvests ahead of threatening weather. These experiences have provided you with insight into a lost way of life that, despite its hardships, held knowledge, connection, and meaning increasingly scarce in our mechanized, urbanized modern existence. The crisp November morning air carries the distinct chill of approaching winter. As you leave your cottage, frost sparkles on the bare branches of trees and covers the remaining cabbage leaves in your small garden with delicate white crystals. Your breath forms clouds in the cold air, and the sun, rising noticeably later, now casts long shadows across the farmyard. Winter on a Victorian farm dictates a different rhythm of life. Not the session of work modern people might imagine, but a shift in focus and pace, reflecting the season's natural limitations and opportunities. The frantic energy of harvest has passed. The fields are now mostly bare, save for winter wheat sown in autumn. Its tender green shoots are barely visible against the dark soil. Today's tasks reflect winter priorities: properly sheltering and feeding animals, maintaining buildings and equipment, and processing crops stored during the abundant months for winter use. While winter farm work offers the advantage of later rising with darkness, limiting outdoor labor in early mornings and evenings, the drawback is that much of this work takes place in unheated spaces, where cold fingers and toes are a constant companion from November through March. Joining Thomas in the barn, the first task involved threshing some of the grain harvested months earlier, before mechanical threshers were common. This repetitive indoor work occupied much of winter for farm laborers. Using a flail, a simple tool with two wooden pieces connected by a short length of leather, they beat dried wheat sheaves spread across the barn floor, separating valuable grain from the surrounding chaff and straw. The work possesses a familiar rhythm. The whoosh of the flail through the air, the solid thack as it strikes the grain, the shuffling step to reposition for the next swing. Though physically demanding, it generates welcome warmth in the cold barn. Dust rises from the beaten grain, filling the air with particles that catch sunlight streaming through gaps in the walls. Thomas advises covering your mouth with a handkerchief, demonstrating how to wrap it around the lower half of your face. Threshing dust enters the lungs and causes later problems. This practical knowledge, understanding occupational hazards, and developing protective measures represent another facet of traditional wisdom, often acquired through experience rather than formal schooling. By midday, you have threshed enough grain to require winnowing, which separates the lighter chaff from the heavier grain kernels. In earlier times, this process was done entirely by hand, tossing the threshed mixture into the air so wind would carry away lighter components while the grain fell back into collection baskets. By the Victorian era, hand-cranked winnowing machines became common on many farms, employing mechanical fans to generate artificial breezes for this separation. Thomas demonstrates the winnowing machine's operation, a wooden box with internal fans that create airflow as you turn a hand crank. The threshed mixture enters via a top hopper, where airstream blows chaff out the back, and clean grain exits through a bottom chute. This is an elegant solution requiring human power, but significantly boosting efficiency beyond purely manual methods. The afternoon shifts to animal care, which is increasingly vital as pasture is unavailable during winter months. The farm's animals, cattle, horses, sheep, and pigs now rely almost entirely on human provision for survival, necessitating daily feeding, watering, and health monitoring to prevent serious illness during winter. In the cattle shed, you help distribute hay from the summer's cut. Now stored in the barn loft, the cows eagerly await your arrival, longing for fresh feed after consuming yesterday's ration. Each animal gets a measured portion to sustain health through winter, avoiding waste of vital stored fodder needed for spring grazing. Sheep, being tougher than cattle and better foragers in harsh conditions, stay outside longer. However, due to lingering frost and snow forecasts, they are now being moved to sheltered paddocks closer to the farm buildings. You and several other workers form a human chain, guiding the flock from distant fields along lanes between hedgerows. Sheep possess stubborn opinions regarding direction, necessitating patience and an understanding of their behavior for effective movement. The farm's sheepdog performs most of the actual herding, responding to the shepherd's whistled commands with remarkable precision, circling widely to gather strays and maintain the flock's desired path. This collaboration among humans, dogs, and livestock exemplifies one of farming's oldest and most productive working relationships. With animals provided for and fed, the shortening winter day is already drawing to an end. The farmer examines the plans for the next day, continuing the threshing, making building repairs, and cutting wood for fuel before sending the workers home. In winter, as darkness falls around 4 or 5 Heglu, evenings are longer than in summer, providing time for activities impossible during the extended daylight hours of the growing season. Back at your cottage, the fire built before morning departure has dwindled. Rekindling it is the first priority. Winter evenings without sufficient heating can range from uncomfortable to dangerous in poorly insulated Victorian homes. Carefully measured pieces of coal are added, a relatively expensive fuel used sparingly and often mixed with cheaper wood or dried animal dung to extend its heating capacity. The cottage gradually warms as the fire strengthens, creating a cozy space that contrasts sharply with the cold darkness outside. This stark difference between sheltered indoor spaces and harsh outdoor conditions shapes the winter experience, fostering an appreciation for the simple comforts often overlooked in milder seasons. Warmth, light, shelter, and the security of stored food alleviate immediate worries about sustenance. Winter evenings in Victorian rural communities provided opportunities for activities that farming demands disallowed. During busier seasons, women engaged in textile work, spinning, weaving, knitting, mending, producing, and maintaining clothing essential for family survival. Men might participate in woodworking, tool repair, or crafts like basket making that provided supplementary income during slower agricultural periods. In your cottage this evening, you attempt basic repairs to a work shirt damaged during harvest. Your stitches are clumsy compared to those who have practiced this essential skill since childhood. Clothing in Victorian farm families represented a significant investment, with garments mended repeatedly before replacement became necessary. Store-bought cloth and clothing, though increasingly accessible in the 19th century, stayed expensive luxuries for most rural workers who depended mainly on home production and upkeep. While working, winter darkness pressed against the cottage windows, illuminated only by firelight and perhaps a single candle or oil lamp. Artificial lighting remained costly throughout the Victorian era, especially for rural workers with limited funds. This economic reality synchronized human activity more closely with natural daylight cycles than in our electrically illuminated modern world, with work commencing at dawn and largely ending at dusk, irrespective of the season. A knock at the cottage door breaks the evening silence, bringing news and sociability from neighbors on a nearby farm. Despite transportation challenges and physical isolation, winter in Victorian rural communities often featured greater social interaction than busier agricultural seasons. With fieldwork reduced, visits between households became more frequent, establishing communication and support networks that aided communities through the difficult winter months. Your visits offer both practical purpose and sociability. Information regarding an upcoming pig slaughter at the farm, including an invitation to participate in exchange for a share of the meat. This cooperative approach to winter food production enabled families to access fresh meat without requiring each household to slaughter and process their own animals simultaneously. The resulting pork was preserved via salting, smoking, or conversion into products such as sausages and bacon, which remained edible for extended periods without refrigeration. The discussion shifted to wider news, focusing on reports of ongoing agricultural depression across British farms. The 1870s initiated a protracted economic slump for British agriculture, caused by several factors: greater grain imports from America, better transport that lowered shipping expenses, and a string of poor harvests and livestock illnesses that lowered output. Andersons down the valley are giving up, your neighbor mentions soberly. Unable to afford rent after 3 poor years, they are moving to Birmingham for factory work. This pattern, rural families abandoning farming for urban industrial employment, accelerated during the late Victorian period, fundamentally reshaping British society and landscape as the rural population declined while cities expanded rapidly. For larger landowners and tenant farmers, adapting to these economic pressures often involved shifting from crop production to livestock raising, especially dairy farming and meat production, which were less susceptible to foreign competition. Conversely, agricultural laborers frequently faced reduced job opportunities as livestock demanded fewer workers than crop cultivation, further prompting migration to urban centers. The late Victorian era brought these transformative changes to rural communities like waves, impacting various regions and farm types at different speeds, yet progressively altering Britain's agricultural landscape. Farming methods, stable for centuries, rapidly evolved due to economic demands, technological advancements, and changing social dynamics. After your visitors depart and finalize the pig slaughter arrangements, you are left alone again in the flickering firelight. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter begin to drift past your window, not yet the heavy accumulation that might temporarily isolate farms, but a reminder of winter's power to transform the landscape and restrict movement. Morning arrives with a transformed world. Several inches of pristine white snow cover the farm, smoothing the fields and buildings into softer shapes. The cold intensifies with the snow. Breath is visible inside the cottage, even before the fire is built to working temperature. Despite the beauty, snow presents practical challenges that shape the day's activities. First priorities remain unchanged. Animals must be fed and watered regardless of weather conditions. Traversing the snow-covered farmyard to the barn, your footprints merge with others already marking the white surface. The farmer and other workers ensured the livestock received early morning attention despite the difficult conditions. Inside the barn, the atmosphere feels almost warm compared to the outside air, with the animals' combined body heat naturally warming their enclosed space. This practical knowledge of animal heat guided barn design and winter management, often accommodating livestock warmth to benefit human living spaces. Planned fieldwork shifts daily according to snow conditions. Threshing persists inside the barn, while outdoor tasks focus on securing access to essential areas. After clearing paths between farm buildings to facilitate the movement of people, animals, and supplies, Without the strain of constant deep snowbreaking, the farmer announces a half-day break in the afternoon, having secured the animals with extra feed in anticipation of continued cold. This flexibility in winter scheduling stems from practical constraints. Some tasks become impossible in severe weather, and the economic reality that landlords typically reduced labor demands during winter when productivity naturally declined. For farm workers paid daily wages instead of annual contracts, such weather-related reductions in work could cause considerable hardship. Victorian rural communities established diverse support systems to mitigate this seasonal vulnerability. These ranged from landlords offering tenants basic sustenance during challenging times to informal resource sharing among neighbors of similar economic standing. More formal aid was provided by the poor law system, though this assistance often involved social stigma and potentially harsh conditions, especially following the workhouse system established by the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834. Most rural families exerted great effort to avoid poor law assistance, seeking it only in dire situations when community and family support failed. The early end to the workday provides an opportunity for a different winter activity, visiting the village school, where their younger children receive basic education. The Education Acts of 1870 and later gradually brought more thorough schooling to rural children, yet attendance was frequently inconsistent because families required their children's labor during peak agricultural times. The small village school consists of a single room where children of mixed ages are taught under the supervision of a single teacher. On this snowy afternoon, perhaps 30 students practiced writing on slates, recited multiplication tables, or read from shared texts. This was the fundamental literacy and numeracy that constituted formal education for most Victorian rural children. Winter attendance typically surpassed that of harvest seasons, when even young children's contributions to fieldwork might be deemed essential to family survival. This seasonal schooling provided many farm children with fragmented education, enabling them to develop basic skills but hindering continuous progression that consistent attendance would have offered. The teacher, a formally trained young woman increasingly common by the late Victorian era, maintained remarkable order among her diverse group. Educational methods prioritized memorization, recitation, and practical skills deemed useful for students' likely future occupations. The divergence in expectations was clear. Boys were anticipated to pursue agricultural or trade careers, while girls were assumed to be destined for domestic service or household management. Your visit ended with plans for older children to assist with the forthcoming pig slaughter. This demonstrates practical education in essential rural skills outside of formal schooling. This blend of formal education and practical skills gained through direct involvement defined Victorian rural childhood, forging individuals equipped for the specific requirements of agricultural existence. The journey home through snow-laden lanes provides moments of unforeseen beauty. Winter sunlight creating blue shadows on white fields, birds tracing delicate patterns while foraging, and ice crystals turning ordinary branches into glittering sculptures. Despite its harshness, rural winter offers aesthetic experiences largely absent for modern city residents. Connections to natural patterns are increasingly rare in industrialized societies. The coming days involve traditional winter activities focused on food preservation. The pig slaughter occurs as planned, creating an intensive period of communal work as the animal is processed into various products intended for long-term storage. Nothing is wasted in this process. From prime cuts turned into bacon or ham, organs added to sausages, blood used for puddings, fat rendered into lard for cooking, and even bones utilized for stock or tools. This intense processing is a hallmark of pre-industrial food systems, transforming seasonal bounty into storable forms that ensured availability during lean times. Prior to refrigeration, these preservation methods established the basis of food security, with winter presenting both a challenge to overcome and an opportunity to prepare resources sustaining communities through the coming months. As December approaches, another facet of Victorian rural life becomes evident: the religious and social observances marking the calendar. Christmas preparations slowly began to incorporate both ancient traditions and newer Victorian innovations that were transforming the holiday across British society during this time. Rural Christmas celebrations generally remained more tied to agricultural customs and pre-Victorian traditions than their urban counterparts, with decorations featuring natural materials gathered from the landscape such as holly, ivy, and mistletoe. Instead of mass-produced decorations found in urban centers, foods showcased local farming and preservation techniques, featuring regional differences in unique dishes made solely for this yearly celebration. For Victorian farming communities, Christmas held deep social significance that went beyond religious practices to encompass vital social functions. The coming together of often scattered family members, strengthening community ties via shared festivities, and creating light during the coldest, darkest part of the agricultural year. These practical and psychological roles gave the holiday significance even in communities with differing religious beliefs. As the year ends, you reflect on the Victorian agricultural cycle experienced through the seasons. The spring planting, full of potential and uncertainty, summer's intensive growth and care, autumn's crucial harvests determining success or failure, and winter's blend of hardship and essential rest. This continuous cycle, with its variations over centuries, shaped not only practical activities but fundamental perspectives on time, work, and human relationship to natural processes. The Victorian era marks a pivotal shift in this agricultural pattern. Traditional methods and social structures coexisted with emerging technologies, economic systems, and social shifts that would ultimately redefine rural life. In this transitional phase, you have observed both ancestral practices destined to fade and the nascent signs of modernization that would eventually prevail. Lasting impressions stem not merely from the physical demands that would deter most modern people from surviving even a single day in Victorian farming, but from the profound shifts in one's relationship to time, community, and natural systems inherent in that agricultural existence. The Victorian farmer lived by constraints and rhythms increasingly alien to modern experience. Seasonal determinism, rather than technological override of natural limitations, a direct link between personal labor and survival, community interdependence instead of institutional support. These distinctions extended to fundamental concepts modern people often take for granted, such as viewing food as something produced through visible, tangible processes rather than appearing through complex, invisible supply chains. The experience of darkness and cold as unavoidable seasonal realities, not conditions automatically negated by technological intervention. The understanding of work as physically embodied rather than abstracted into information manipulation. The Victorian agricultural world you inhabited through these seasons presented hardships modern people would find intolerable. Physical demands exceeded contemporary conditioning. The absence of medical care is now viewed as basic housing conditions, lacking fundamental comforts. It also offered experiences increasingly rare in modern life, such as direct connection to food production, interdependent community relationships, seasonal rhythms aligning human activity with natural cycles, and tangible links between effort and outcome, all while offering vulnerability to weather and natural disasters without technological buffers. As your time in this Victorian farming life ends, you possess a deeper understanding of what was lost and gained during the transitions separating that era from ours. The physical hardships, limited opportunities, social restrictions and vulnerabilities to disease and disaster reflect genuine progress achieved by subsequent generations of innovation. Yet the ties to land, community, seasonal cycles, and direct production embody values deserving reassessment in our technologically mediated age. The most valuable lesson from experiencing Victorian farm life is its insight into our food relationship, a fundamental necessity transformed almost beyond recognition between then and now. The Victorian farmer perceived food as the direct outcome of visible labor, valued by the effort expended in its creation, tied to particular landscapes and communities, and constrained by natural limits that human effort could not entirely surmount. This viewpoint presents an alternative to contemporary food systems, which are defined by invisibility, disconnection, perceived abundance, detachment from production realities, and technological mediation that masks natural limits without honoring the genuine difficulties of Victorian agriculture. We can still value a more conscious connection to food production, not necessarily by reviving Victorian methods, but by increasing awareness of the systems that sustain us. Similarly, the Victorian agricultural relationship with time, governed by daylight, seasons and natural growth cycles instead of artificial schedules, provides perspective on our own increasingly detached temporal experiences. The patterns of farm life linked human activity to natural rhythms in ways modern schedules often deliberately ignore, establishing potential disconnects from biological and ecological realities that shape our existence regardless of technology. As you settle into sleep this winter evening in Victorian farm life, the differences between that world and our own become clearer. You wouldn't survive a day as a Victorian farmer, not just due to physical strain, though that would overwhelm most modern bodies, but because that existence demanded fundamentally different relationships with food, community, time, and nature than those defining contemporary life.